All right, here's a quick update on this revamp I'm doing of my pencil pie. I got the new box that doesn't have holes cut out, so I got to cut these holes out. I modified my base plate. One thing that I was having an issue with is the clearance inside the box here. Once you put the plate in, I'm going to probably have to cut that tag out. But once you put the plate in and it's fully seated, these were just kind of sitting in the slots, but they're too thin of a profile, and they would shift up and shift around in the box when it was closed, even with the screen mounted and everything. So what I'm doing now is I created some little retainer clips in my 3D design, and so these will basically, when they're sitting flush inside the box, you can pop this in. I'm trying to do it in my hand here, and then this little tab, we'll click it in if I can get it to go. It'll just snap in, and then when it's sitting in the box, it'll shift around a little bit, but it's not going to pop out of this slot. And then you just pull that tab out a little bit and they'll release. So that should work fine for this. The design is just a little bit clunky. I may go back and improve it. The nice thing about the way I'm building this is it's extremely modular, so I can go back and remove the components, unplug them without having to fully disassemble the system in a way that requires a lot of work to put it back together. But I can pop out the components that I need to, print a new design if I need to, and pop it back in there. So I may do some more testing for that. But that's where we're at with this. So I'm going to work on cutting out the holes in the new box to mount the charger port and the switch. And then once that's done, I'll start working on the assembly. Oh yeah, I've got to drill holes for these little things too. This was my little hinge stop design. Hey everyone. I'm back getting ready to assemble this pencil pie unit. So last time we talked, I was working on cutting out the holes for the charging port and the power switch. So that's been done. It looks like plastic on the outside, but it's some sort of veneer, and then it's like a paper board or sort of like a particle board or something in there. So it's pretty easy to cut out with an X-Acto knife. It gets a little tricky, trying to cut the angles right and everything. But that's the nice thing about installing a bezel, is once the bezel's installed, it's going to look nice and clean. So that's what it looks like with a bezel installed. It looks like it was made for it. Anyway, I'm going to get started on putting this thing together. I'm going to start installing the bezel, and I'll probably have to break this video up and put it back together later, because some of these things are going to require me to stop and complete some tasks. So anyway, starting with the bezel. I did some testing on the previous box and used super glue, and I didn't like the way it turned out, because when the super glue oozed out, I really couldn't clean it up and keep it from leaving these white streaks and marks around the hole. So this time I'm going to use a product you can get at craft stores in the jewelry section called E6000. It's a little messy to work with initially. In fact, I'm going to have to go grab some paper towels. But the nice thing about it is it's really easy to pick off any of the ooze after it sets and dries. So it's really gooey. I'll probably have to apply it to the bezel with a little bit of like a toothpick or something. But once I get it on there, it's going to set really nice and be really easy to clean up. So I'm just going to put a dab on here and let it just kind of bead. That's a pretty big bead right there, so I'm going to take something and just kind of spread it around here. Let's use an old business card. Trying not to get it too much on my fingers either. Another little bead. It is really goopy and really thick, and it likes to leave strings when you pull it off of stuff. Anyway, I've got the material on there pretty good, so I'm just going to set it in here. Press it in, and now that's going to just set. That'll set up really nice. Just clean up a little bit around the edges here. So that'll grab onto not only the edge where the bezel's sitting around, but it's going to grab on to the inside edge and should hold that in there fairly well. All right, so let's set that aside. Bezel's in there. It's going to take a little while to set. All right, let's start getting this together. So I had mentioned that I needed to figure out a design to hold the controllers, these little guys, in here because of the clearance. So what I did is I created these little tabs. They flex just enough to where I can pop the controller in and pop it out when it's set in the box. Another quick thing, I've got some two-sided tape here. I'm going to use that to kind of secure the bottom of the base down to the fabric inside the box. And then it's also going to come in handy for the components that sit inside some of these slots so that they don't shift around and move. All right, so starting off, I'll go ahead and start with the pie. I'm going to mount the pie first. So 2.5 millimeter screws, 5 millimeter standoff, get a screwdriver so I can tighten that down. Just tighten the standoffs on there nice and snug so they don't shift around. Alright, so those standoffs are on there. So basically, we already went over how this is wired in. I put some Kapton tape on there to keep it from making contact with whatever and possibly causing a short. So these will pop in. There it goes. So once that's in there, that's how this USB port thing is going to sit. All right, onto the 10 millimeter standoffs. Just going to screw these in. Just hand tighten, nice and snug. Hat for the LCD screen. Make sure you line the pins up and then worry about the holes. All right, that's seated fully. M2.5 nuts, go right on the top. And I got this little tool handy to help tighten them down quickly. All right, so I'm just gonna give these a little extra tighten here, make sure they're nice and secure. They're not gonna work loose. I don't want to tighten them too much, but I want them to be snug so they don't come loose. All right, so there's the pie in the hat. Just gonna bend this cord out of the way here. We're gonna take these 12mm M3 screws I've got. We're just gonna pop them in the bottom. Like I said, these ones are a little bit more snug, so you may have to turn them to get them to go in all the way. Okay, those are in. Charging port is going to mount right here. And then I got these M3 screws or nuts that are going to go right here. So I will cover this up with Kapton tape once I get it mounted, just to make sure that nothing that might be exposed to the box doesn't short out these contacts. Tighten these down to a decent snug. And then this one, like I said, I'm going to have to double-side tape. There's the little platform it's going to sit on. So I'll just take some double-sided tape and put that here. But this is what it's going to look like right here. Battery taped in. Plugs all hooked up. Controllers will snap in. Like this. Just like that. And that's what the layout's going to look like. Have that hooked up right there. And that'll basically be the inside, except for the ribbon coming in for the display. I think it'll look pretty nice once it's done, and it being fully self-contained and still being more like a console than a handheld makes it an interesting piece. All right, last time we talked, I was working on getting some wiring soldered for the last segment of the connectors. So what I've got so far, I kind of already ran it underneath because of the way I'm connecting it. So I had these blade connectors that'll connect to the switch. So I went ahead and wired those in, and I pigtailed one off of this little servo connector to make it easy to disconnect from the switch. So now instead of trying to run the wires in and solder it in place, I can just plug it in. So anyway, this is where we're at. We're gonna go ahead and pop this switch into its spot, just like that. And that's how the switch looks. And then I need to put some double-sided tape on this here. And for this one, I'm going to use the thicker double-sided tape. It's kind of like got a little bit of a foam to it. It just seems to be a little bit stickier, so that's what I'm going to use. So we'll just cut a little piece off. We'll stick it to the bottom of this. And then we'll peel the backing off. And then this will just sit right on that little platform. Just press it in place. And the nice thing is I can remove it because that tape's not permanent, but it also keeps it from moving around. All right, so the next thing we have to put in is this battery. I'm going to use regular double-sided tape for that. If it ends up not being strong enough, I'll move over to the other tape. So I want to orient it in here like this so these wires can kind of coil around because there's quite a bit of extra wire. So I'm going to flip it over and tape on this side. I don't know, I might do 3 strips. Let's see. I was going to do 2, but it looks like I can fit 3 across. So I might do that. Yeah. So I got 3 strips on there. This tape is a little bit tricky to pull off with your fingers, so I got this little razor knife here to get up under that wax paper and just peel it up. And there we go. So this will sit here. Now that shouldn't go anywhere. It should stay put just good, like that. Now we've got to deal with this tangled mess of wires. So we're going to tuck this extra cabling down in here. The battery one is the middle one off of this. So that would be this connector here. So we'll plug that in. And we'll just tuck that over like that, out of the way. All right, this is the Raspberry Pi power. That one's going to connect to this one. And this is the input connectors for the power. So this connects here. And I'm going to tuck this one under the Pi just a little bit, so it's up out of the way. So these 2 connectors are last. So let's do this one. It's got this nice little insulation on it, which is nice for the blade connectors. So we'll just plug that in. just like that. Tuck that wire. And then we'll plug this one in. Like that. And the last one to plug in is the power to the Pi. So that's plugged in. You can kind of tuck this down here like this, out of the way. And trust me, this doesn't look nearly as messy as the last job did when I didn't have all the fancy connectors. And it looks like I somehow wallowed out the hole for the switch, so I may have to go back and glue that in. That's not ideal, but somehow that hole got wallowed out, probably from me test fitting. Overall though, this doesn't look too bad. You can see the power indicator light from when I switched it on. So the last thing to connect, well, let's pop the controllers in so we can see what they look like. Controller 1, controller 2, and I have the screen here. I haven't taped it down. I did wipe it down a little bit earlier so it's not as dirty as it was, but I decided that shipping tape is probably the best for this because it forms around angles easier than other tapes do, and it has a pretty strong hold but is easy to remove. So I've got this board that's kind of the interface between, I don't know how many pins, and then I think 40 pins. So it just reduces the number of pins for the ribbon cable. I've got it taped down, so now I'm just going to take some strips of shipping tape, and I'll probably just rip them into narrower strips like that. And I'm just going to go cat-a-corner on this. So I'm going to tape it down first and then kind of get in the crevice a little bit and then come up on the screen. And then once again push down around the crevice so that it doesn't raise up and it's nice and secure. And I'll take a razor knife and clean up the corners later. Alright, I think I can get 3 strips out of this tape. So again, this corner over here. That feels pretty secure. Move this over. Do the last 2 corners. So if I wanted to, I could probably go over the top of these with some strips of tape running along the perimeter just to give it some extra security. But this should probably be enough. We'll see how it does. All right, razor knife to clean up the corners. right, last thing to do is mount the screen. So we're just going to pop it in there like that, push it flush, and now the screen's mounted. I can tuck this ribbon cable under the excess, and then I will plug that into the slot here. That's going to be tricky. I could probably pop this face out and do it a little bit easier, but let's see if I can do it like this. I do have tweezers. There we go. Make sure that's seated well. Lock it in. Looks good. There we go. So now I should be able to power the Pi on. Now I haven't paired the controllers yet, so I'm gonna have to plug in a USB controller and maybe a keyboard dongle and go through and set these up, which I can do on another video, but it's pretty self-explanatory how to set up a controller. So let's just power it on, make sure everything's working. There's the screen. All right, let's try that again. Boot up. There it goes. And it's telling me there's no controllers. So I'll have to go dig up the old controllers. I don't remember where I set them. But that's pretty much it. I just need to set up these little 8-bit do 02 controllers, and it'll be ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And just kind of move it around so you can see how secure everything stays. Everything's right where it's supposed to be. Nice and neat, clean. I'm happy with it.